Hey everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today I'm ridiculously excited because we are starting a new series in which we are going to chat with some absolute master musicians and educators. Today's guest is someone who I think has had a huge influence on the music and especially improvised musical world. He is someone who is a master of essentially entering what he refers to as the space, right? This place where you can be playing your music, playing your instrument without being stuck in your head. I would imagine that a lot of us can relate to that feeling of being stuck in our head, whether we're having, thoughts about how we sound, or competition, or fear of making a mistake, etc. So let me just cut straight to the chase and say who today's guest is. It is the great pianist and educator and composer, Kenny Werner. So in this interview, he walks us through some of his methodology for actually practicing entering that space and releasing your ego so that you can actually play from a really, really honest and sincere place. Also, just want to quickly let you know that I actually shortened the interview a bit to make it work well for YouTube and just make it as efficient as possible for all of you to get to learn the most you can in a shorter period of time. But that said, there is so much great insight in the entire conversation. So what I'm actually planning to do is release the full conversations I have in this series as a podcast. I will be sure to link that in the description. Highly recommend you check it out. Now, really quick before jumping into the interview, I just want to tell you about Kenny's new book, Becoming the Instrument. So I read this book and it is already having a huge impact for me, and I highly recommend it. We're going to talk a lot more about the concepts that you'll find within in the interview, and I would imagine a lot of you might have already read his previous book, Effortless Mastery. So for me, this book is a really great continuation of those concepts and also an expansion. So I highly recommend you check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description. The link I put in the description is actually an affiliate link. So if you click it, I will get a very small commission, which I highly appreciate. No worries either way, but if you're down to use that link and you plan to get the book, that would be awesome. I'll also be sure to put information in the description so that you can actually get in touch with Kenny's team if you want to, get added to his email list, or if you're interested actually in some of the courses that he himself teaches, which I would highly recommend, although I have not gotten to take them yet, but it's definitely something I'm personally looking into for myself. All right, without any further ado, let's jump into the interview. Welcome everybody. My name is Noah Kellman, and it is my great pleasure to be here today with the great Kenny Werner. I'm really, really excited to chat with you, Kenny, because actually I've been a fan for many, many years, as I'm sure many folks are. But yeah, so I wanted to just jump in here and start chatting with you a little bit to start off about your books. So Effortless Mastery, your first book was released in 1996. Maybe in just so many words, briefly, if you could just kind of tell our viewers here a little bit about what drove you to write Effortless Mastery, and also what Effortless Mastery is about.
Well, it started quite unintentionally. I was seeing something very different than what people normally commented on. I thought if there was a certain passage you couldn't play, that if you isolated it and let the hand play it, it would get it in a more definite way than if you were trying to make the hand play it. And it's the same thing with jazz. If you're trying to play on the rhythm or trying to play on the changes, it's usually when you get lost. It's dynamic. It's still changing. The latest, I think, and clearest definition of what effortless mastery is, separating the body from the mind and separating the mind from the ego. It's essential for the second thing, too, because the mind can sit and watch while the body plays. That's what it means. Really, becoming the instrument means when you touch the instrument, instead of thinking, where is this supposed to go intellectually, musically, it starts intellectually. You say, where do the hands want to go? So the exercises are not demanding from a musical point of view. They only pay attention, are you jumping in and trying to control the hands? Because we found, as effortless mastery has continued to boil down to a clearer and clearer concept, that the body plays better than the mind making the body play. For some reason, it fell on me to be able to precisely tell people how they did it. And in trying to demonstrate it, it broke down into different subjects of how you program the mind or reprogram the mind. How you, I'm just talking about the piano now, but it's on every instrument. How you educate the mind not to pull music out of your hands, but to observe and see what your hands want to play. And that's why it's reflected in this book, Becoming the Instrument. An
I've got
instrument
right
has no,
here.
there you go. An instrument has no ego. So if I'm the instrument that plays the instrument, that means at least while I'm playing, I have no ego. So what does that mean? It means I'm not trying to produce. It means I'm watching
Hmm.
while production is happening. And I eventually had
Mm-hmm.
to define, well, then who's playing if you're not playing? You don't walk around when you're talking to people all day wondering, how do I sound? How do I sound? But
Mm-hmm.
somehow that's
Mm-hmm.
totally acceptable in music. And what happens is you leave your natural state to try to become somebody else or someone that
Mm-hmm.
plays better than you do. Now, if that worked, that would be great because all anybody really wants to do is just play better. But in fact, it creates the opposite effect. And that's where the course on Effortless Mastery begins. Okay, you
Mm.
have a dysfunctional loop. The more
Absolutely.
you care about your music, the harder it is to play well. When you don't play well, you feel bad. And that's really what's wrong. It's really, if you didn't feel bad if you didn't play well, you'd find it has remarkable little consequence.
Sure. Sorry, I just wanted to take a second to jump in here for a minute. So just to kind of summarize for everybody here, so what I'm kind of gathering from what you're saying, and definitely you touched upon several things that I'd like to ask you about. But so essentially, effortless mastery is the concept of maybe, recognizing that in your mind, and, this obviously isn't for everyone, but I think honestly, most people, in your mind, you have a certain element of ego or that kind of voice in your head that's actually disrupting you from reaching your best state of playing, right? And we pretty much all of us have
Yeah.
it. I certainly have it, and am totally happy to admit that, of course. And so we're kind of speaking to that place that you get into where maybe you're sitting down at a performance in class at a jam session, or maybe even just by yourself at the piano, as you touched upon in both books, I believe. And that voice is in your head, and it's actually making you less focused, making your either your performance or your practice less, honest. That's for sure, and
Authentic.
actually kind of making you right less authentic, and it's kind of making you approach the music from the wrong perspective. And so your entire methodology, I find it so fascinating because it's something that you kind of came into, in other words, and you became the person who has learned how to help people get rid of that voice, break away from that voice. And so I do want to just kind of take this minute to highlight this book. So this is your new book, Becoming the Instrument. So in some ways, maybe a follow-up to Effortless Mastery, but of course with a
Yeah,
lot of
it's an expansion
fantastic
of the
new
subject.
wisdom.
It's funny,
Gotcha, an expansion.
before I ever said anything about the relevance between life and music, because the subtitle is actually even more expressive. Lessons in Self-Mastery from Music to Life. There are
Mm-hmm.
things I learned that I had pinpoint understanding of, and it wasn't even special that I did. I just saw other people in a delusion.
Sure.
So, in order for the body to play, the mind has to be somewhere else. So it could be looking out the window, or it could be, and many musicians can tell you they binge watch Netflix and practice for 3 hours and they were burning. So we know that
Mm-hmm.
principle is a neurological possibility. But what's going to keep the mind from jumping in is separating the ego from the mind. The mind that's not tormented by ego or infected, even for a few moments, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just observes, and it observes with appreciation. That's how we get things
Sure.
like gratitude, because we're not stuck with, if the ego is controlling the mind, we tend to come on to the things that we wish were happening or are not happening. And the same thing happens with
Sure.
music. We start trying to do what we wish we were playing instead of what we're really appreciating, what we're really able to play. So the lessons
Absolutely.
of life are absolute. From the space, the guy makes a call because he has no fear, because he's not in the past or the future. He's in the present. And at present, he's
Mm-hmm.
dialing a number or whatever. Then he's talking to the guy, and with confidence, he does it, and he gets the gig. That's a success.
Mm-hmm.
Action two, let me just shut this off. Action
Sure.
two, he comes to the space, he calls, he says, we have a great band. The guy says, I'm sorry, I'm not looking for any bands. Click. Success. Action 3, he
Hmm.
keeps meaning to call him, but he never quite gets around to it. He wants to make sure he's got energy, or that he's in a good space of mind spiritually, or that he read his tarot cards, or that he doesn't have a cold. And he never gets around to making the call because he's too afraid of what the answer will be.
Right.
So it's okay to take an action and it works. And it's okay to take an action and it doesn't work. If you are totally
Right.
down with it, in music, people will dig it. Because you're not
Absolutely.
acting like you made a mistake. You're acting like you accidentally found some new music.
Right.
Because of a state of
Absolutely.
mind that never changes. So
Hmm.
you take that lesson to life, and the life lesson is, don't consider success actions you took that were successful. Consider success taking the action.
How does effortless mastery apply to composition, right? The composition process. So how do we kind of get into the space, and just really quick, since we may not have time to dive super deep into the space, but
It's
the
very
space
easy, actually,
may
this
be
one. This one is a really shorter
sure.
thing. If you understand, one of the legs, support of the foundation of effortless mastery is that it's the only place where you want to get used to sounding bad.
Hmm.
So what you're doing, in order to liberate your state of mind, you let the hands move, and you practice watching your breath instead. And that's what I was going to show you, is the exercise that leads to all this. Well, I will, but let's do the
Yeah.
composition for a second, right?
Sure.
So
Hmm.
if I have really weaned myself off of needing to sound good, then of course I sound better. Because the only time you sounded bad is when the times you were trying to sound good.
Right.
That's how
Absolutely.
essentially it is. That's why there's a very broad market for the information. You know, when you
Right.
look at a piece of paper to compose, that's a moment that causes anxiety. And what's the most anxiety moment in any composition? A blank piece of paper.
That's for sure.
Now, why? Do you know why? You want to write something good.
Mm.
That's why a blank page produces
Yeah.
anxiety. Effortless mastery means write something bad. You'll fill page after page. You can't
Right.
totally liberate unless you liberate yourself finally from the one thing musicians never want to liberate themselves from: the need to sound good. So, number one, as soon as you let go of needing to write good, you say, I'm just going to write anything. I'll bet you by at least no more than 5 notes, you're already digging what you're writing. That's part of the reverse
Great
psychology. And then you start to care, and then it starts to dry up again. Now, if you want to train your mind to only be in that fertile state, when it dries up, you shut your computer off. Oh no, now I'm trying to push it out again, trying to be somebody else than I am. Because you know who you are? Wherever your hand goes for the next note, that's who you are. You know, you want to know what your voice is? The next sound you make that's your voice. Anybody looking for their voice is saying, I'm looking for someone else's identity because I don't really believe in my own. But we treat it as if, even when we're saying, I want to contribute to the planet, great idea, then as you're writing notes, only think about the planet. Don't think about music. Because surely you'll get hooked into just, the truth is, you want to write a good piece because you want to feel good about yourself. The truth is not you meaning a collective you.
Yeah, of course.
You don't want to play badly, because if you play badly, you're going to feel bad. And that's all it is. So once you realize that, and you have aspirations for another kind of altruistic person, you know, if you could say, I'd rather play bad from a space of gratitude than play well and neurotically manage the shit out of it, that's a very mature place. Because the Buddhist thing is to hurt anything is to hurt yourself. So, you know, everything in that general direction. So whereas now I'm taking a thing from life, which I did many times to write both these books and for my own life, what is the musical equivalent of that? The musical equivalent that every note I play is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. So if every note I play is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, now it's something you try to put your belief into, but you don't really believe it. But the more you practice believing it, and you don't practice it by addition. In other words, you don't add the thought gee, I really think this is the most beautiful sound I ever heard. What you do is you subtract thoughts, all the thoughts that quantify and put context on things. And when they're all gone, you start finding out, holy shit, the truth is every note I play is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. So what about if in life, and this for me is much harder, every day I live is the most beautiful day of my life. Now you sit down and imagine that every note's the most beautiful sound. Well, I don't really imagine that. But if you've taken all the blocks between your vibration and this vibration, you may start to notice that you have no discrimination between one note and another. It opens your harmony up, and it opens your rhythm up, and it opens your patternistic thinking up. So, but it doesn't occur. It's not exercise. It's a result of an exercise.
I see. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, I'm really glad that we clarified that.
Enjoy whatever sound you're making on whatever part of the keyboard equally, and it can even graduate if you do it as long as I have, and if you have the gift of teaching it to others, it really upgrades you more. That look.
Awesome.
That, because I'm programmed, that instantly puts me to a slightly intoxicated state.
Yeah.
You can feel it, but
Yeah.
Oh.
No,
So
I think, yeah.
I've crossed the void where I think there's anything between me and the intoxication of music. That's music, and I'm intoxicated.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So
that's great. I understand.
I'm going to tell you the steps that get you there, right? But they're reprogramming steps. But before I say that, I want to say that in this era, we did discover, Vivian and I, my assistant and project manager, that I can really teach this to people remotely, which means we don't have to wait till we get a school in the Tahitian Islands and everybody comes for a retreat and all that kind of stuff that would be great, but we need somebody to come in and put a few dollars down, right? But I can have a course and anybody in the world can take it. So since last summer, we've been doing it. Right now, as I said, we're doing the lines course. But if you email, for example, and you could put it in the chat, Kenny Worm.
Well, sorry. So, so I was just going to ask, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you if they're interested in taking that course?
It's really Vivian, because she's the one that catalogs everybody. So let me just tell you.
Okay.
I want to make sure, because what's happening is if this speaks to you, then you, I can coach you through it so that you find yourself behaving differently and definitely getting different stories. I mean, different reactions from your practices in your life.
Yeah.
But when I work a class with somebody, we work on going through the whole reprogramming so that when you touch that instrument, you notice that something has changed. Instead of feeling the responsibility, you feel the draw. And when people have that, and they're already 50, 60, and 70, and they're finally getting that life, or they're young, they're really, really happy to feel like a major part of their blindness is being lifted.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I can, All right. So here's the first exercise.
Awesome.
This is what I boiled it down to. Let's say you have a stream of thoughts, and their thoughts are things that you can't answer. They're always from the mind. You're always in the future or the past. From the space, you're always in the moment, and there's actually never any questions in the moment. They're all in the future or regrets of the past. So how do I get in there? Okay, so I'm having these thoughts, and I'm going, oh yeah, I've been down this road before. It never really ends too well. It ends with me not knowing what's going on, feeling more anxious, and actually ruining today, because instead of being in today, I'm having a pall over my head because I'm thinking about tomorrow, or I'm guilty about yesterday. So now here's the thing. I acknowledge, and it took a long time to realize this, that I cannot just change my brain, because my brain, or my ego, is smarter than I am. I could resolve not to do something, but later that day I'll be doing it. But I can take a break So I can break that pattern of thought by doing this. And then I say to myself, well, I'm already breathing. Or students say to themselves, in fact, you've been breathing all your life. You're a virtuoso. In your best days and your worst days, you've been breathing all your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
we're just going to watch it breathe. So we're not going to make a spiritual thing out of it. If you're becoming the instrument, you're a machine that plays the machine. Inside there is a smaller machine, and it goes like this. You can feel it's more elastic. That's you breathing, right? So for 20 seconds, I just want you to do nothing but, and no big deal, just watch it breathe. Go. And stop. Now you probably feel very different. Do you?
Yeah, I do. I feel
Instantly.
more centered.
Right. Now, if you were thinking about stuff before that, you have the permission to go back to it. Let's say I'm being neurotic. Okay, I just took a break. I just watched this thing in my chest breathe.
Hmm.
But when I came out of it, I couldn't get as neurotic as I was before.
Yeah, I almost can't
Yes.
remember what I was thinking about before.
Right. So this has several innovations. This exercise really can't be overstated. Because first of all, one of the innovations, I don't care who's doing it. There's nobody that can't do this. Someone could say, I can't meditate. Yeah, I can't either. But you know what? I'm already breathing. All I have to do is take the headlights and flash them down from the world and go, shh, Now I'm noticing that I'm breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And all this is a biological, mechanical thing. It's not a spirit thing. Because when you expect it to do spiritual things, then you can't remember how simple it was to do. The reason it's 20 seconds is because if it was 5 minutes, you would never get there. Most people would say, oh man, okay, I got to just watch myself breathe for 5 minutes. But they would simultaneously be intimidated by the enormity of 5 whole minutes. But you know what?
Right.
Anybody can drop their entire life for 20 seconds.
Right, because you're continually recentering yourself, essentially.
Yeah, what happens
Recentering your
for
focus.
only 20 seconds. And then when you're done, you don't even have to fight away your old self. You actually surrender and go back to your old self. And by doing that, there's a reverse psychology. And sometimes your old self is not there.
Yeah.
The distance between where the truth is and where you want to be, what we don't really understand is there's a moat, and you cross that moat with exercises. If there's no exercise to achieve equanimity, whether you play good or bad, then it'll only be a fancy phrase that you could say at the coffee shop. Having learned how to watch my breathing instead of my thoughts, I bring my hand over here, and it plays.
Mm-hmm.
But I am still watching my breathing. So that overhead shot's not really good, Noah, because we see more of you now.
Right.
If I'm watching my breathing, I lift the thumb, drop the thumb. Lift the second finger, drop the second finger. I mean, I'm using the left hand, so. Lift the third finger, drop the third finger. Now, if I start to care, I would drop my hands. But as long as my hand's doing it by itself, why? Because where am I? I'm preoccupied with watching my breathing. That's the space. If you're in the space, the hand's got to play. Because from the space, you don't need to do anything.
Yeah, I find myself drifting in and out of it as we go. Right, I'll.
Good point.
Yeah.
What do? It's a very strong program because let's say you are drifting in and out. As soon as you notice it, you drop your hand. And you just focus on the breathing again, not the breathing and playing. So of the two things, the breathing is much more important. You don't want to lose that. If you lose it, you stop playing. And you go back to watching you breathe. And once you feel like you've locked in again, you bring the hand back, you go to the finger you were on, and move and drop that one. So you finish one hand, you finish the other hand, but you drop your hands whenever you find yourself getting back in. And then you're starting to program yourself. It's the beginning of a program where you trust your hands because they are the ones that play.
Right.
But how much do we ruin our lives with things that really aren't life-threatening? Because we want them to
Daily,
go.
most of us.
How many years do we
Right.
throw? Yeah. So from
Absolutely.
that space, you're practicing to let the hand play. And instead of trying not to get in the way, you're actually absorbed in something else.
Mm-hmm.
You're breathing. And would it be incorrect to say you're taking your mind away from music and you're putting it on the source of your life? Music is not the source of your life.
Mm.
Breathing is.
Right.
So all these things kind of come along at the same time. You start to gain more and more of an appreciation for what it means to watch yourself breathe. And you, even in a relationship, you're like, oh. You don't take a deep breath because the exercise says take a deep breath. You take a deep breath because suddenly you're watching and you realize that your chest is asking for a deep breath.
I was going to say, I think myself included, most people watching or listening to this could start with that first step for, like a nice period of time and really work just on that. I know it's something that I'm going to be thinking about quite a bit. And I don't even know that I personally would be ready, for the following steps, which I of course have read about in Effortless Mastery. But right.
But here's the thing.
Exactly.
The first step for the first week is not at the instrument. It's really this, see if you can remember that whatever you're thinking about now never makes you happy for whatever reason.
So I have this kind of funny question. I've been meaning to ask you actually. So it's funny because we're often told, don't let your fingers take over, right? And that's coming from this idea of don't let your built-in muscle memory be the thing you play with. Use your ears. Your ears should dictate where and what you play. And I wanted to...
There's nobody
Sorry.
It sounds really reasonable, but there's nobody that doesn't play with their muscle memory. Otherwise, they wouldn't be fluent.
Right, absolutely.
If you're really fluent with your muscle memory, you can make a few little turns or something. If you're fluent with your muscle memory, you don't have to focus on your playing. Ironically, you are able to make changes because of what the drummer's playing.
Right.
So, for example, if you're not fluent with time, then you don't really connect with the drummer because you always want to make sure you're still playing the right time. Now, you may be able to play in time, but you may have to manage it to play in time. That takes away some spontaneity because if you do go for something, you might lose the time. So there are certain things about music that you want to be in the body. And your foundation, 90% of what everybody plays is muscle memory. It may sound a little different because of where they place it in the rhythm or who they're reacting to. But if you took the romance out of it, you'd see everybody is always repeating themselves. So
I love that. Yeah.
Caught this idea that you shouldn't just play with the fingers play because they always play the same thing. Guess what? Find me someone that doesn't do that. We're not that great of a computer that we can spew out different information every time. You need a computer for that. A computer has what, 1 billion ways of rephrasing, of getting from this chord to that chord, and maybe we can think of 5 ways.
Right.
Without playing in time. In time, we probably use 2 ways. We either do it this, we either go, or we go, maybe we have 3 more. But
Right.
that's the way everybody plays. When you want to try to get away from it, you just kind of throw your hands around. But the muscle memory intelligence is what makes it make sense.
Last question. How does effortless mastery relate to listening? How can we actually effortlessly listen and intake the information while we're actually listening to different recordings?
Great question. Every word, because humans have trouble embodying the truth for too long, like we talked about earlier, every word eventually gets baggage in it. You say the word meditation, that's supposed to keep the key to the healing of your whole life. And yet people's efforts to meditate have put the baggage on the word meditation. You say, okay, let's meditate. You go, oh, wow, I don't know if I can do it. Wow, I'm not in the right space. Look at all the baggage on the word that's supposed to set you free. So the word listen became one of the most popular verbs in all the schools. Hey, man, you got to listen. You two should be listening to each other more. And what's happened, it's gotten baggage. By listening, it now means trying to figure out.
Hmm.
You're really not listening and appreciating anymore. It's been tinged with education. So now when
Right. Right.
negative things happen, either you're saying, oh God, that guy plays so much better than me. Oh man, what am I going to have to do? Well, maybe 4 hours a day for 10 years, all these
Right. Right.
ridiculous thoughts. And I'm
Right.
sportscasting, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
narrating your brain, right?
Yep.
So,
100%.
right. And that's not helping anything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
listening, unfortunately for me, the latest thing in Effortless Mastery, because it is dynamic, it keeps growing, is not listening, it's hearing. Now,
Hmm.
that's not just a semantic. You don't need to listen. If you're in the same room as the other sound, you're going to hear it.
Yeah.
So why would you have to
Yeah.
listen?
Hmm.
So, to me, a less baggage way of listening now is to say, I'm not going to listen and I don't have to listen. I'll hear it.
Hmm. That's
And
great. Yeah.
in hearing but not listening, you might even start enjoying it more again.
Right.
And your ego
Right.
might start listening. Why is this great? Or for whatever reason, if you're practicing effortless mastery and listening, right there you take it off and you sit down and you watch yourself breathe.
Hmm.
And once you got back to the space, which is only in this moment, you put it on. Now you and the sound are in the same moment. See, when you started to listen, you started to go into the future. How am
Right.
I going to play like that? Or am I ever going to add up to, you know what I mean? So you're not
You're
listening.
consciously in your
You're
mind.
not
Right.
listening anymore. You're
Right.
thinking. That's what happens to
That's
music.
a really good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not. I won't listen. I've had my students practice. Don't listen. And all of a sudden, the music sounds really magical because you're
Yeah.
not trying to put it in a context where you think you've got it. You're just
Right.
hearing it.
Absolutely.
When you just hear it, you find there's a much lower bar at which it becomes really intriguing and interesting, and maybe just a whole sound because you're not breaking it up with listening. So that's how you
Right. I
effortless
love that.
mastery
Yeah.
means put some music on, don't listen. You'll hear it. You're in the same room or you have headphones on. And as soon as you start listening, take the headphones off and shut it off. Go back to the
Hmm.
space. Then if you think you've got a little more patience, put the music on again. But don't listen, stay in the space. How you stay in the
Hmm.
space? Maybe you could be watching your breathing while you're hearing them. If you watch your breathing,
You're just allowing your ears to hear it.
you're allowing your ears to hear it because you're taking the ego away. You're pulling your
Right.
ego's attention onto something that actually is the most important source of its life. Your breathing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, man.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, and
Oh,
we
you're
all
welcome.
really appreciate it. So, one more time, here is Kenny's new book, "Becoming the Instrument," available at all your
All the
book
out.
selling platforms. Highly recommend it. I've read it. It's wonderful. And if you related to any of the stuff we were talking about today, which honestly I think most musicians do, I personally would definitely recommend checking out Kenny's online courses. And so I will post information in the information section here in the description if you're watching the video. And I'll also post the email that Kenny provided me so you all can reach out, get on the list, and find out more about his work, his books, his seminars, and online courses. Thank you so much again, Kenny. Really appreciate you being with us today, and the
You're
wisdom
welcome.
has
No,
been
my pleasure.
really, really fantastic. Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day,
You
and
too.
hope we get to chat again soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching today. I had such a great time talking to Kenny, and I hope you found these insights as helpful as I did. Again, I put a quick link in the description to check out Kenny's book, and I also am using an affiliate link so I get a small commission. If you're down to use that, I really appreciate the support. Of course, also be sure to check out the information in the description about how you can get in touch with Kenny, especially if you're interested in actually studying with him or taking one of his courses. All right, thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to continue this series. And if you got something out of this video, please be sure to hit the like button. And of course, be sure to click subscribe and hit the bell to turn on notifications so you don't miss any more videos just like this one. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.